Hey everybody, welcome back. We are watching the last episode of The Sons of Sam. This one's called Rabbit Hole, and that feels exactly what we've been on is a rabbit hole. A lot of coinkydinks, but maybe they weren't coinkydinks. I don't know. It seemed like law enforcement and the investigators were going to look into things further, but then it seems that things have come to a close. So, not quite sure where everything is going or headed in this last episode. As far as I know, David Berkowitz, Berk, Berk, is it Berkowitz? I'm starting to doubt the last name. Don't know if that's right. Yeah, Berkowitz. I don't know if, as far as I know, Berkowitz is the only killer that's been named. Based on the information from the show, no killings have happened in the same pattern since he's been incarcerated. That's kind of where we're at with things, really, is was this a big rabbit hole of conspiracy theory or was it something more? So we're going to watch that and find out what they say in this last episode. I'm also going to do one more episode after this. It's going to be watching Ken Main's review, Detective Ken Main's. He has a YouTube channel called Unsolved No More. I'll put the link down below so that you can watch it before watching any of mine. And you can see what he thinks about what the show presented. I don't know if he has any back history knowledge. What are you doing? Sometimes he has inside information and sometimes he doesn't. So we'll find that out and see what he thinks about it all. So I wanted to remember to tell you to watch that and I will watch that after this one. So let's go ahead and get this one watched and see how they wrap things up or not.
This was the Golden Fleece. He got an interview with a guy who'd never spoken to anyone else and everyone wanted.
I thought there had been other interviews, but
And
they were
sure
kind
enough,
of like show stealer kind of interviews.
My mother had been married to someone else and my father to someone else, and so they didn't
Saw some
want to
weight there.
keep me.
he was well spoken. We were all expected to meet a raving
Had he
maniac.
had some
It just, I
psychiatric
never
treatment?
just
He's got a
wanted
scar on his
to,
neck right there.
Came to the end that they came
No.
to.
There's a price to pay. What usually happens to people that are involved in the occult, it's the tragic auto accident and the freak accident, and they're gone.
So all this had
So
been
he's
going
indicating
on.
that
It seemed like a
it was
cycle.
purpose. That was
Yeah,
murder.
was want more violence, and they planned that they were going to do this.
It's something even so horrible to contemplate, but
Is that how they viewed these shootings, or at least most of these shootings, as like the ultimate sacrifice? Is that sort of the idea?
yeah.
Did Murray lead? I don't know if I'd call it leading.
There's some
Murray
leading in
say
there.
things.
Murder of Stacy Moskowitz, the blinding of Robert Violante in Brooklyn. Is that you?
So he's admitting to 2 of the 8.
David Berkowitz largely confirming everything of his investigation and giving him more details on
What
it.
about the dog? Ask him
Murray,
about the dog.
But apart from the Carr brothers, Berkowitz wouldn't give it up.
It's because they're still living.
And so,
And the reason why I'm saying ask about the dog is now that he's having logical conversation and that sort of thing, and maybe under psychiatric treatment, which is, um, I think, relevant based on my history, um, I want to ask, did he truly hear a dog tell him to do it, or was he just saying that for sensationalism?
I feel the city did wrong. They never followed up the case.
and we thought that the case would get reopened on the strength of this.
Nope. 16 years
Unfortunately,
later?
it just
Nope.
outraged.
They don't want to look bad.
okay? It's all politics. They would do anything to dispel Maury Terry.
So, in I don't know if I've commented this during this series, but in other reactions that I've done for certain, I've commented about the majority of law enforcement out there are good guys and gals doing their job, protecting society, being thorough, following the books, all that kind of stuff. But there are some out there who may not do things thoroughly or who put up a defense, put up a wall if they think they're being criticized or stuff like that. And then you've got your just out and out dirty cop scenario type of thing. I don't know anything about New York Police Department, especially during this time period. I I know it's a large force and they've got a lot of stuff they're dealing with and all that kind of stuff. Past that, I don't know the politics of it and everything like that. My town, small county, yeah, there's politics. Not even talking about the current administration that is doing the law enforcement right now, but using an example, asshole number three was driving my car, and he was actually out of the county. He was down the mountain and got pulled over by a trooper because he was speeding. And so the trooper takes a look at his license, runs my plates on the car, and says, "This car doesn't belong to you." And he goes, "Yeah, it's my girlfriend's." Gave my name. And and the cop said, "Oh, is she the daughter of so and so?" And he's like, "Yeah." And he's like, "All right, you need to slow down." And I think I needed to get my plates inspected or something. I think they were like 1 month off or something like that. But he told him to slow down and to tell me to do something and that he was going to let him go. So, in a way, politics favored me, favored my boyfriend at the time. So, small town politics. Are they good? Are they bad? It can be both, especially depending on what side of the line you're on. But politics does play a role, bottom line. That being said, another example, and this involves two different sheriffs, but both small county and both good old boy network for you, those of you that know that term. And it was during the time that I had a stalker. So this was after asshole number two. Do you see a trend? But I had been stalked to the point that I was afraid the person was going to show up to my house. A lot of folks know where I live. A lot of folks don't know where I live. I try to be as private as possible. I know it doesn't seem like that doing this, but I had gotten scared enough that I wanted a gun. And so I was talking to asshole number two. We were friends. We're still friends. But I was telling him how scared I was and everything. And he's like, "Well, I've got four guns you can choose from." And then, so I picked a Beretta and he gave me Stinger bullets and he made sure I knew how to use the gun. I'd had gun safety class back in seventh grade, but it had been a long time. So he went over everything with me, and for 6 months I carried a gun with me. And I let both sheriffs know, the county that I worked in and the county that I lived in. I let both of them know that I had a gun, that it was not registered to me, and they're like, "That's fine, not a problem," blah 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 blah. But, you know, I'm I tell myself all the time I'm always paranoid about getting in trouble for something. And as my former coworker used to say, I throw everybody under the bus, including myself. So I had told both sheriffs that I had this gun, and they're like, that's fine, just make sure, blah, 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 and all that kind of stuff. So the good old boy network, politics, whatever you want to call it, there's good and there's bad to it. And I kind of went off on a rant, and I realize that right now. And I can't remember. Oh, they were talking about the politics of the case and them not reopening it, not looking any further into it, and all that kind of stuff. But they did reopen it, but they must have closed it again. That's what I'm guessing. So, at any rate, back to Mari.
There was a detective involved in that case. He was kind of Murray's nemesis. His name was Coffey.
John Coffey, like the drink, only spelled different. So the Queen's law enforcement was open to looking further into it. The Bronx one was not.
The wheels of justice refused to turn. While the authorities were willing to rest on their laurels, I was not.
Boy, he's a tall guy.
And he says, I have to introduce you to somebody. And I look over, and this
It's
guy
Maury.
sitting next to me sticks his hand out, and he's like, call me Maury.
I was a quote-unquote expert on occult and cult-type activity.
So what did he think?
And I uncovered a whole litany of things that needed more investigation.
Okay. The reason why I said okay is good. If there's information that needs to be looked into further, then it should be looked into further. Rule it in, rule it out, one way or the other.
They were all partaking in the drugs and the sex and so on. They call themselves the
Looks
Church.
like several of them have rap sheets.
Someone saw and chased a yellow Volkswagen not far from where Stacy Moskowitz was murdered.
That's right. I forgot about that discrepancy.
Somewhere along the line, somebody got to the head of this thing and took it in a completely different
I was going to
direction.
say, things got
That was
serious.
under my-
I couldn't help but think of Ron Sisman, the photographer who had allegedly been killed by the cult.
Did he do nudity? So I'm lost. Is Sussman, was he a part of the group? Recorded the murder and then the group decided, this isn't good and killed him? Or he just happened to be in the area, which is a little suspect also.
In the 4 years since my interview
That's a
with
cool
Brooks,
lion
I had
statue.
tracked down
Now we know Mari is dead. Did he die naturally or by murder or?
The connections that he made about the park in Yonkers. The group often met here in
They are strong coincidences.
Were there other people? And what about the police investigation?
So this is the 97 investigation. He's gained some weight back.
Is that van relevant to this case?
Yeah, I was part of a group.
So Sussman was a part of the group.
You know, there's some suggestive interviewing going on.
There have been
Yeah.
stories about a certain
I agree with her on that. I mean, law enforcement
members or leaders ever
or the DA or whoever, prosecutor, they can't use this interview at all because of the way the questions are asked. It needs to be David giving the information, not confirming. Which is different from, and Mari may not care one way or the other because he just wants it out there on record, whether it goes back to court or not. And I'm curious as to what her spin's. So it sounds like her spin is that she felt things were legit and they coordinated with Mari to do this interview through this news station, which is more credible than Inside Edition. But she's seeing things go a different way. He's asking things in ways that they hadn't counted on or stuff like that.
I just didn't buy these other theories.
Well, and this interview is different from the other interview. His yeses have a hesitation to them or a reluctance to them. And he's not giving any info like he did with the other one. Like he's not making declarative statements. I was not the only person who committed the crimes, or I didn't pull the trigger on all of them, just some of them. He spoke more. This one, he's just doing yes and no.
We talked about the process, church. Just follow the evidence. All I was asking for was resources.
So it sounds like this investigator, this detective, is being able to corroborate. I've never been able to say that word. Being able to corroborate a lot of what Mari has found and dug up and connected and all that kind of stuff.
Thank you very much. We'll be in touch.
That was their
And I never heard again.
thanks, but no thanks.
It's all political. A lot of people made their bones on this case. And, politics is politics.
So there's two different law enforcement departments that were trying to dig further, investigate further, and weren't able to.
During a wild weekend party in the 72-room Southampton mansion of producer Roy Radin.
Oh, I forgot about Radin.
And that web kept getting bigger and bigger, knitted together by the occult.
That's the lion I like.
He was all over the place. But if you didn't agree with him,
so it sounds like those two different detectives from the two different departments, even though they were able to corroborate some of what Mari was saying, it sounds like he passed the line at some point and went into conspiracy versus having logical connection and some theoretical evidence to back it up, kind of stuff. And I'm saying it that way because they still didn't have hard proof of stuff. It was all still hypothesis. This is possible kind of stuff. So, and it sounds like even Carl is getting ready to say, yeah, up to this point, everything made sense, but after this point, it was just too much, which is a shame. And I'm one of those, I get stuck on wanting to prove my case and being insistent and all that kind of stuff. And I have to work hard at knowing when to fight the fight and when not to fight the fight.
I used to say, Maury, this isn't your case. Yes, it is my case. And I said, it's my case. It's what did you do?
I got shot.
The public will never, ever truly believe you, no matter how well your evidence is presented.
I guess David was right in the end.
In 2010, when I was living up in New York, I met him at Walgreens.
Are we going to find out what happened to him?
I think those last few months of his life especially were very tough because he had to know that he was dying.
So it sounds like he died naturally. Still got more info?
Okay. Okay, thank you.
They're getting ready to catch him?
Mr. Crawford, we're going to help you out.
He had a key. Did he shoot himself?
Officials found her nude from the waist down in the back of the church. For years, the debate has raged over whether
Crawford was the security guard?
It comes with great honor to announce we solved the 43-year-old cold case. Stephen Blake Crawford, 72-year-old, was a security guard at Stanford University at the time of the murder.
Another truth. So they formally disbanded 2 years before all of this happened. And of course they're going to deny any connection. Oh, that's cool. I thought they said Pine Street Investigators. So Pine Street Irregulars was the group's name. So that's the end of The Sons of Sam, Descent into Darkness. Trying not to get emotional because I cry at everything. I don't think I've talked about that yet in this series, but I cried everything. So I cried when Darth Vader died, if that gives you any hint. So it's a shame that the walls that were put up in defense were so tall and so thick that Maury was just beating himself up against that wall to the point that he had started to become unrecognizable. And phrasing it that way, because not only was he changing physically from the stress and everything, like the one detective was talking about, but his connections and stuff, it sounded like it started to stray, not be as strong links and all that kind of stuff. What did they say? 40 some years later, they solved Arliss's case. So he was right about that. The only thing I've been thinking of since we've gotten to this point in this series, and they kind of started off by saying this, but then you kind of lose it because you're like, who did it? But it truly was more about Maury and less about David. Just help yourself. Just walk right across me. Walk across me again. This is what I have to deal with. So what I was going to say, after watching all of this and seeing all the theories and the evidence to support the theories, and some of them actually turning out to be true, and even though they can't use the interviews, the 2 interviews he did with David, I thought they were there in the very beginning. I thought he and somebody else had tried interviewing David and it didn't go well. And he just shut down and wouldn't talk to anybody. So I didn't think the 97 was the second interview. The interview before that, I didn't think was the first, but I don't know. But watching all of this, seeing all the connections, learning more about the case, as we were starting to get to the wrap up, all I could think was, I want to know what Kenny thinks. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to watch Detective Ken Mains and see what he says about it, since his career right now is about unsolved cases, and kind of go from there. This is probably not a case he consulted on or anything, but I'm curious as to what he thinks or found out or whatever. So I'm going to watch that. Thank you for joining me on this one. I will see you guys on the next one. Bye.